Another batch of executive orders from President Joe Biden looks to address racial inequity, one of them dealing with fair housing policy. Marcia Fudge, Biden's pick for housing secretary, spoke on the purpose of those policies during her confirmation hearing Thursday.
Opening the door for families, especially families of color, who have been systematically kept out in the cold across generations, to buy homes and punch their ticket to the middle class.
One of the directives takes action on those housing laws, while others address the DOJ's use of private prisons, support for tribal governments, and racism toward Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. We want to bring our panelists into the discussion now. Mary C. Curtis, a columnist for Roll Call and host of the Equal Time podcast. Addul Ali, chairman of North Carolina Black Conservative Voices, and Morrisville Town Councilman Steve Rao. So glad to have you guys with us again.
Pleasure to be here.
I want to pick up on the Marcia Fudge confirmation hearing. And one of the questions that was asked of her at the hearings was, is it ever okay to treat people differently based on their race? Can we achieve home ownership equity with policies that are not based on race? Let me open up with you, Steve.
Absolutely, Deborah. I mean, I think that it's so important that home ownership is based on, not based on race. And the fact of the matter is that the new secretary is right on point. I mean, only 46% of Black Americans today own homes, and they've been discriminated against, denied mortgages, denied loans. The process of redlining, where mortgages and loans are denied based on race, and in low-income areas of this country, and this has been going on for years and years and years. So I think we have to tackle the problem, and this is the first step in the right direction. To acknowledge that we cannot base home ownership on race. Everybody, every American in the land of opportunity should have the ability to purchase and own their own home.
Now, talking about the policies to address, first we have the executive order out there, and Addul, we have the executive order, but policies stemming from that executive order, Congress is going to have to enact. Do those policies need to specifically reference race or be race-based?
I don't think so. And I think from what we saw with the last subprime mortgage debacle that crippled our country's economy, solely putting people in houses and giving them mortgages based on the color of their skin is a horrible idea. And, again, briefly, we just saw the results of the last time we attempted that. And quite frankly, very few people who received those subprime mortgages were able to stay in their homes. It's something less than 10%. So I agree with the councilman there. We should not be deciding who gets a home based on race. It should be based on your ability to comfortably pay for that mortgage. And we should be providing, if anything, opportunities for people to buy mortgages that they can afford. So I agree with the councilman on that.
And Mary, this is an issue that's close to your heart. You followed it. What are your thoughts?
Well, yes, I think we have to look and see that so many of the past policies that hurt African Americans were based on race. Until the Fair Housing Act of 1968, you could legally discriminate. Obviously, I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina, in a neighborhood where I would not have been able to buy that home. And so the remedies do have to reference race. Even with the mortgages that the previous guest mentioned, many times we saw that African Americans who qualified for better types of mortgages were steered to these risky ones basically because of race. And we saw the last administration, the Trump administration, pull back on the enforcement of a lot of provisions of the Fair Housing Act. And remember, Trump had talked about in his campaign, he had to protect the suburban housewives from hordes of low-income people invading their neighborhoods, where this is pulling back on those and saying, listen, we have to look at past policies that discriminated so we can, of course, eliminate mortgage discrimination and housing discrimination and make affordable housing more open to Black people.
I'd like to move to another executive order that specifically referenced racism in Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, really wondering, does it pave a way for easing up racism, and what does it really address, that particular executive order? What was the real purpose, do you think, Steve?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think that as an Asian American myself, and I've been speaking with many Chinese Americans across North Carolina and the Triangle region, calling the coronavirus, COVID-19, the China virus, specifically profiling and targeting Asian Americans, that this pandemic was their fault, I think has been very embarrassing to the Asian community. And I think that the executive order is addressing that specific fact that we should not be targeting or treating any American differently because of their race or their color of their skin. I think this is the step in the right direction. I mean, whether having now President Trump out of the Oval Office, he doesn't have the microphone anymore. I think that it'll make it easier for Asian Americans to get through it. But this is a global pandemic. And in this specific situation, the president never referred to it as the coronavirus. He always referred to this as the China virus.
We've got just a few seconds left, and I want to get both you, Mary, and Addul in here. Addul, first, your overall impressions of these executive orders, and is this paving a path for, really making some changes in terms of equity, or is it just executive orders that could be overturned in the future?
I think it's a little bit of both, but I don't think you can rule by executive order. I think at some point we're going to have Congress involved, nor do I think you could executive order people's thinking. I think the more open we become as a country and have candid conversations amongst the racial groups, the better off we'll be. But I don't see that executive orders will change people's minds in and of themselves.
Mary, last thoughts?
Yeah, I think they're a start, and you have Susan Rice ahead of this organization. Also, you see, after that insurrection at the Capitol, where there's so much of white supremacy, some of the folks who were there with Confederate flags and such, this is so needed, and it is a start. And you see that he has also brought back the anti-bias and diversity training in federal governments. So as your previous guest said, we need to have those conversations, but first we need to face the truth.
Let's move to something that's kind of current and in our cultural news. A previously announced transformation of the $20 bill is now moving ahead. The White House says it wants to speed up the process of putting Harriet Tubman on the $20 bill, moving Andrew Jackson to the other side of the bill. But not everyone is happy about the move. A Time magazine columnist called the move a sign of disrespect. Addul, what do you think? Is it disrespectful?
So look. Nah, I don't think it's disrespectful at all. And I quite frankly, I think it would be pretty cool to see Harriet Tubman on a $20 bill. But I want to ensure that this is just not window dressing. What we need to be doing is ensuring we have policies that'll get our people more of those Tubmans. So that's great, that's good, and that's fine and well. But we need some policy to back it up so I can get some more Tubmans there.
I like that, some Tubmans. Mary?
Yeah, well, I agree. I think that, you saw COVID. Anytime there's a crisis, Black folks are hit disproportionately, which is why some of those executive orders targeting Black businesses are great. And also, it would be good to see her. I know some people are saying, well, she was against Black people as currency. It's disrespectful to put her on currency. But this was a woman who was a union spy, a suffragette, a civil rights worker, and not enough people know about her and all of the things she did. So sure, and she replaces Andrew Jackson, who, let's face it, owned slaves and was in charge of the Trail of Tears for Native Americans. So I think that would be a justice.
I hear you, Mary. And Steve, I love to hear your thoughts on it as well.
Well, I think Harriet Tubman is an American hero. And I think that we need to acknowledge heroes in our country. What she did as a spy and freeing slaves is incredible. And that story needs to be told to our children and our grandchildren. And so I think, for those that say that it's disrespectful, I completely disagree. I think it's the right thing to do. And in terms of history, President Andrew Jackson did serve in the presidency, but as I read more history, I'm just shocked and appalled of he beat slaves, he disenfranchised 50 million Native Americans from their ancestral lands. This was a man that held the White House, but it has to be called out, and historians need to bring that out to our children, that no president of the United States, regardless of what time in history, can do that to American citizens and treat them so inhumanely. So I think take him off the bill as soon as possible and put Harriet Tubman on there, I'm excited.
Always some thoughtful insights from all of you. Steve Rao, Mary C. Curtis, Addul Ali, thank you so much for being with us.